avalanche of action. Bigger, better, different. It's got to be when he's around. Vistas of sweeping splendor. Different. It must be so if he's in the picture. Fabulous beauties, all of them dolls, every one different. They've got to be when he's around.
My name's Bond, James Bond.
The new Bond.
Suppose I were to kill you for a thrill.
The different 007. George Lazenby. The different Bond from the same stable. Diana Rigg as the Comtessa, the different Bond woman. This one's got class and style. The villains with a difference. Telly Savalas as Blofeld, a new destructive force.
With a difference. If my demands are not met, I shall proceed with the systematic extinction of whole species of cereals and livestock all over the world.
Gabrielle Fazzetti as Draco, a tough mafia daddy with a problem child.
Papa, where's James?
Don't worry, he'll join us soon.
But we can't leave him.
He doesn't need your help.
I will not go without
You'll
him.
have to.
On the day you marry her, I'll give you a personal dowry of £1 million.
Oh. 007 times more exciting than your wildest dreams. The creative skills of the cinema's master filmmakers.
We've hit the rush hour.
If you think you know your Bond, think again. This one's different. This one's got heart.
I love you. I know I'll never find another girl like you. Can you marry me?
Time enough for life to unfold all the precious things love has in store. We have all the love in the world. If that's all we have, you will find we need nothing more.
This is M-Wire, Movie Week in Review. M-Wire is brought to you by Audible.com. Sign up today to get a free audiobook download at www.audibletrial.com/geekcastradio. Start today with a free 30-day trial with over 100,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Don't forget to follow Audible on Twitter at audible_com. And now the latest and greatest in movies with M-Wire.
This never happened to the other fella.
Hello and welcome to Shaken Not Stirred, MWire's spotlight on the Bond films, which is brought to you by the Geekcast Radio Network. I am one of your hosts, TFG1Mike, and joining me as always is MovieRevolt Dan. Hello.
Hello.
And today, depending on where you lie, what side of the fence you fall on, today we might be talking about the best or the worst Bond film in history as we discuss On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Fuck this movie. There you go, folks. Podcast over. That's my opinion. Okay, so a little background on me hating this film. It has nothing to... At first, until I actually saw the film, it had nothing to do with the film. It had to do with an emotionally scarring backstory from my childhood. Back when GoldenEye came out, they had released a bunch of merchandise, hats, t-shirts, all this stuff. And for my 16th birthday, someone gave me a all black baseball cap 007 hat, and it had, the 007 logo was in gold on it. I was like, oh, that's freaking cool, and I wore that hat everywhere. I have no idea what the hell happened to that hat today. I had no clue. It went to hat heaven. I don't know. But back then in 96 as a 16-year-old, I was like, ooh, I want a 007 birthday cake for my 16th birthday. That was essentially just, a whole chocolate cake with the gold 007 logo on the cake. And my birthday comes up, and lo and behold, sorry, they didn't know how to do and it was one of those Dairy Queen ice cream cakes, which these Dairy Queen cake makers can make anything on their ice cream cakes. I have no idea why they could not make in 1996 a 007 logo. It's not that freaking hard. Now, I know that, the cake makers put a lot of work into it and everything else, and I'm not saying that they're lazy people at all. I'm just saying, it's not that hard. 007 with a gun barrel, or not a gun barrel, a gun handle, a gun grip. Guess what kind of cake I got for my 16th birthday?
Well, I'm guessing it's not a good one if it left this much of a scar on your life.
On Her Majesty's Secret Service, a white frosted cake with purple frosted bits with it saying On Her Majesty's Secret Service 007.
That is quite odd. I never would have guessed they would even make a cake like that. That's, of all the Bond movies, that's the one they go with. That's kind of strange.
Yeah. That was my initial reaction to On Her Majesty's Secret Service, was that emotionally scarring backstory. And then I had heard in certain circles that Lazenby, for the fact that he only did one picture, even though he was signed to do what was it like? He had a 7-picture deal.
Yeah, they gave him 7 movies to do, but he eventually turned it down.
Well, he turned it down because he wanted to be a dick and he wanted more money from them.
Well, there was that, and there's a lot of different stories of why he turned it down. There's one, the one that seems the most evident is the one where his agent told him that Bond was kind of going away. He saw where movies were going, and he figured that Bond was kind of like a old hat, and eventually that franchise was going to die. But obviously that didn't happen, so that's one big reason why he didn't.
50 years later.
Yeah. So it wasn't the best advice ever, obviously. So that's one big reason why he was only in one movie.
Yeah. Like I said, the reason I heard, I had listened to another podcast I like, Better in the Dark. It's Thomas DJ and Derek Ferguson, 2 guys out of Brooklyn reviewing movies, and they had talked about it briefly. In the episode that I had listened to, it was the GoldenEye / Tomorrow Never Dies episode from them, because they were talking about how GoldenEye was the relaunch after Dalton. And they were talking about how, the Lazenby thing came up. But I always thought Lazenby was a joke as Bond, even though I had never seen the movie up until a week before this recording. I just always heard that he just wasn't that great of a Bond, and people didn't like it because, you go from Sean Connery, the arguably the best Bond ever, to this.
Yeah, it was an odd choice considering, he's not an actor. He was just a model that became an actor just for this one role. So it seems odd that they would go this route. I almost had like a conspiracy theory that they knew that whoever was going to come after Sean Connery was going to fail. So they figured, okay, let's just get someone that we figure we can throw in there for one movie and we'll never have to use him again. Because it's like trying to replace like Babe Ruth or John Elway. You're trying to replace a legend, and no matter how great that person is, most likely people are going to think he's a failure. So I think that's one big reason why. Though they did try to get Timothy Dalton, who turned it down because he thought he was
right, because he thought he was too young at the time.
Yeah, but that's a little my own personal conspiracy theory because it felt like a strange choice.
Now, do you think, even though Connery had said that he wanted to retire or whatever it was, I forget, did they say, hey, we're not going to use you anymore, or did he go to them and he said that, you know, he's not interested in doing another one?
I think he was done. He was done in You Only Live Twice. I think he kind of was done with the role. He wasn't. He was kind of fed up with it. And he had a bad experience when shooting that film. Like, he was hounded by fans and the press, and he never got a moment's peace. And I think that was a big reason why he stepped away for one movie.
Yeah.
So
I think that personally, if he had come back for this one, this movie would have been so much better. Because you're putting, as you said, a model up against Telly Savalas as Blofeld. Seriously? You're putting a freaking model up against Telly Savalas? That's...
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if he would work in this movie. I think if they made Connery fit in this movie, they would have to change a lot. Just because how... This was kind of a reaction towards what came before. It wanted to go more towards the book in that tone. So, yeah. I mean, I'm sure that he could have been put in this movie, but I think a lot of what was in it would be adjusted to fit his kind of sensibilities. But yeah, I think it would probably been a bigger hit for sure. But
yeah. Well, let's head over to JT with Just the Facts, as always. He does an amazing work, and he's going to give us the plot of the film, and we'll come back and talk about it after that.
While on vacation in Portugal, secret agent James Bond saves Contessa Teresa Tracy de Vincenzo, a young woman trying to commit suicide by drowning. When 007 meets her again later in a casino, Tracy invites him up to her hotel room to thank him properly. The next day, Bond is kidnapped while leaving the hotel and brought before Mark Ange Draco, Tracy's father and the head of a large European crime syndicate. Draco offers Bond a dowry of £1 million to marry his daughter, believing Bond would be able to protect his daughter from her troubled past. Bond refuses, but says he will keep seeing Tracy if Draco can help him find Ernst Stavro Blofeld, the head of Spectre. Back at MI6 headquarters, Bond argues with M, who is against the arrangement. Despite his commander's protests, Bond begins a romance with the young Contessa. He even attends her father's birthday party back in Portugal, where Draco points Bond in the direction of a law firm in Bern, Switzerland. Bond heads to Bern and discovers through papers found in the law office that Blofeld is corresponding with a genealogist in England in order to claim the title of Count de Beauchamp as part of a larger scheme. Bond poses as the genealogist in order to gain access to a clinical research institute Blofeld has set up in the Swiss Alps. There, Bond meets the Angels of Death, 10 young women from around the world that he discovers are being brainwashed by Blofeld. He intends to send the women back out into the world carrying bacteriological weapons that will sterilize the world's food supply. Bond tries to get Blofeld to leave the country where he can be arrested without violating the Swiss neutrality. However, Blofeld's henchwoman Irma Bunt captures Bond and brings him before Blofeld, who has figured out who Bond really is. Bond escapes, skiing down the Alps with Blofeld and some Spectre henchmen in pursuit. Arriving in a small village, Bond runs into Tracy, and the pair make a run for it, escaping from Blofeld's people after a brief car chase. When they are waylaid by a blizzard, Bond and Tracy take shelter in a barn where the usually reserved 007 confesses his love for Tracy and proposes marriage, and she accepts. However, when they leave the barn the next day, Blofeld finds them and tries to kill them by starting an avalanche. Bond survives the avalanche but finds that Blofeld has now taken Tracy hostage. When he gets back to London, Bond is informed by M that Blofeld has announced his intention to cripple the world's food supply with his brainwash agents if his demands are not met. M informs Bond that the world governments are giving in to the madman's request and that Bond is forbidden for trying to rescue his fiancée. Of course, Bond isn't having any of this and teams up with his prospective father-in-law Draco to mount a rescue. They attack the research clinic in Switzerland, destroying the facility and rescuing Tracy. Blofeld himself is captured after a bobsled chase that results in him injuring his neck when he runs into a tree. A lavish wedding is then thrown for Bond and Tracy, and after they leave on their honeymoon, Bond stops a few miles down the road to unhook the flower chains from the back of the car. Tracy remarks on how happy she is now that Bond has given her a future, and just then, a car driven by an escaped Blofeld whips by with Irma Bunt firing a rifle out the side of the car. Bond leaps into the car intending to run them down, but stops when he sees the bullets meant for him have taken the life of his bride instead. The film ends on a sad note, with Bond cradling the body of his lost love, lamenting to police that there's no rush, they have all the time in the world. On Her Majesty's Secret Service opened on December 18, 1969, and was directed by Peter Hunt, who had previously been an editor on all the previous Bond films. The film starred Australian actor George Lazenby as 007, replacing Sean Connery in the role after Connery had a falling out with producers. The cast also included Diana Rigg as Bond's ill-fated lover Tracy, TV's Kojak Telly Savalas as Ernst Blofeld, Gabrielle Fazzetti as Tracy's father Draco, and Ilse Steppat as Blofeld's henchwoman Irma Bunt. Reviews of the film at the time were very critical, especially concerning Lazenby's performance. Derek Malcolm of The Guardian was dismissive of the new Bond, saying as much as he was not a fan of the previous films, he preferred Connery's acting to Lazenby's. And Tom Milne of The Observer was not any kinder, saying in his review that he thought the film would be the death of the series. However, there were some kind words for the film. Alex Walker of the London Evening Standard and Judith Crist of New York Magazine both enjoyed Lazenby's performance, saying it was less sinister and more suave than Connery. Modern critics, like those at the time, are still split in their opinions, but despite this, the film carries an 82% fresh rating on RottenTomatoes.com. The film did generate some trivia, and most famously, or infamously, was the decision of actor Lazenby to leave the franchise before the film had even premiered, despite being offered a 7-film contract. Reportedly, he made the decision after consulting his agent, who thought the character of James Bond would be really out of place in the liberated 1970s. This seems strange when you find out that in order to get the part, Lazenby began using Connery's barber at the Dorchester Hotel, and he even bought a Savile Row suit that Connery never picked up so that he could look the part. And somewhat surprisingly, like Roger Moore before him, Timothy Dalton was actually offered the role of Bond in this film but turned it down, considering himself to be too young at the time for the part. Dalton, however, would return to the role in The Living Daylights in 1987. It's also known that the film very closely follows the book of the same name, which caused some continuity errors, that being Bond and Blofeld meeting again for the very first time in the film, despite their meeting face-to-face in You Only Live Twice. And did you know that this film was the only film in Bond movie history to be set and shot entirely in Europe? Filming took place in England, Portugal, and Switzerland between October 68 and May of 69. To say the least, and to be fair, On Her Majesty's Secret Service is a divisive film for Bond fanatics. Some love it, some hate it, some are just indifferent towards it. I'm in the last category myself. It's okay, it's a Bond film to be sure, but Lazenby didn't really capture my attention that much. This has been Just the Facts on Her Majesty's Secret Service. I'm JT from Saskatoon. Now, back to TFG1Mike and MWire.
Thank you once again, JT, for all that Just the Facts goodness, and very, very interesting. As I always ask you, obviously, neither one of us were around when this came out, but when did you first have an inkling to see this? Was it when you went back and rewatched them from the DVD sets, or was it did you see it beforehand? Did you see it on TV at all or anything?
Actually, this film I only saw earlier this year. It's one I kind of stayed away from because like you mentioned, it kind of has this negative connotation. It's like the redheaded stepchild of the Bond franchise that they try to keep in the basement and not talk about. So I figured, I'm like, okay, I'll just skip that one. So I ended up going back and watching it this year because I wanted to see all the Bond films. So this was really my first experience with this movie.
Yeah. This was my first experience with it as well. I did not have any inclination to seek this out afterwards. As I said in the intro, I always thought that even though this movie ends on such a down note, I always thought it was just a joke simply because of Lazenby. Really, really bad Mad TV or SNL skit or something like that. But watching it, I kept saying, I want Connery back. or somebody else. I just can't get behind why people think this movie is good.
Well, I will try to enlighten you on why people enjoy this film, but
We will. Oh yeah, we'll save that for when we get to the highlights and lowlights. Let's run down the cast really quickly. You've got George Lazenby as James Bond, Diana Rigg as Countess Tracy Vicendo or Vincendo or whatever the hell you say her name is. Telly Savalas as Ernest Stavro Blofeld. Donald Pleasance, who had appeared in You Only Live Twice, both Brock. Wait a second.
he.
Oh, okay. He was suggested for Blofeld. Okay. You got Gabrielle Frizzetti as the head of the Union Course, Major Crime Syndicate. You got Elise Steppett as Irma Bunt. Ugh, she's creepy. Bernard Lee is back as M. Lois Maxwell is back as Miss Moneypenny. And George Baker as Sir Hilary Bray. Outside of the fact that I can't stand Lazenby, I really like the cast overall. I think it was very well put together outside of him.
I agree. I think they knew that Lazenby was going to need help, so they try to surround him with talented actors, and especially, someone like Diana Rigg, who has a lot of experience in similar format because she was in the show The Avengers. No, not the comic book, the one based upon.
Yeah.
But I think they knew, okay, this guy is not a greatest actor. Let's get him people that can pull him along. And same thing with Telly Savalas, who we'll get into it. But I like Telly Savalas, but he seemed kind of miscast. I kind of missed Donald Pleasance when watching this movie, But yeah, overall, I think the cast is relatively strong. They get a lot of strong foreign actors that really aren't household names in America, but they bring a lot to the movie. So.
Right. And of course you always have, Desmond Llewellyn back as Q. Very interesting way of seeing Q interact with a 007. I don't know. Now this has just popped into my own head. It would have been a weird twist of fate if they had, and I know they would never do this, and this is probably sacrilege, and I'm probably going to get hate mail for saying this. It would have been a really, really cool twist of fate if they hired Connery back, but as Blofeld.
That would be interesting. I don't see.
Of course, it's not going to happen now, but still,
That would be an interesting choice, though. I think that would. I think that would have a negative effect more so than anything. I think it's kind of like.
Yeah, I know. Like I said, it's not not one of my best ideas ever.
Yeah, it's like going out with a girl and like you just broke up with like a long relationship, and then you go out to dinner and you see that girl again. It just reminds you of what you just had. I think it could be a bad reminder for all the Bond fans about, you remember this guy and you loved him. He's no longer Bond anymore. So.
Yeah. Overall, I don't know. Before we get into our highlights and stuff, let's talk about some of the backgrounds and some of the fight scenes and the soundtrack. And I don't know. I just couldn't get behind this. Even just looking at it with a critical eye, I found so many things to just be like, this. Why am I watching this? Damn it! I want my $2.99 iTunes rental fee back.
What did you think about the opening title sequence and the song? Well, or the lack thereof of a song. It was really just an instrumental. What did you think of that?
I was expecting a song. I was expecting something saying "On Her Majesty's Secret Service" or something. I like the opening title. I like how it's revealed. I like the purple background. I like how they're using the British flag, and you can barely see Ian Fleming's James Bond in. I mean, you look at that picture, you can barely make it out. I mean, I've got it up here now, and you can kind of see it, but it's like Fleming's name is almost blended right into the British flag. I mean, I like the imagery of it. I think it's cool. As far as Bond opening title sequences, I think it's one of the worst ones we've had.
What did you think of the song in particular?
It's just an instrumental.
Yeah.
I mean, It's no John Powell, it's no John Williams, it's no John, well, it's John Barry, but it's no. I was expecting something more. If you're each time a new Bond happens, you think of this is rebooting the franchise, whether it's a soft reboot, whether it's a hard reboot. In this case, with Connery not being on speaking terms with Broccoli at the time that he left, you would think that they would go all out and attempt to do something more grand with this. And it's just so subtle, it's forgettable.
See, I actually really liked the instrumental. It was strange, I'll admit. It was I was taken back by the fact that I'm waiting for the lyrics to kick in and waiting for the lyrics to kick in, and they just never do. I liked the score to it. I didn't mind it that it was more subdued. I felt it fit the movie in particular,
Yeah.
and I think it was used throughout the movie. And then we did actually eventually get a song. There was the, We Have All the Time in the World that was done by Louis Armstrong, which I never would have guessed that he did a Bond song. It was like right near his death. And I was listening to the commentary, and they talked about how they wanted to get a song with On Her Majesty's Secret Service, but it was just too clunky, and they couldn't make it fit. So they ended up going a different route. And I think it would be better if they called this movie All the Time in the World, because the title is clunky to begin with, which makes it a little bit more forgettable. It's an odd choice, but
it only ties into one part of the damn film. It ties into when Bond says, "I'm retiring" or "I'm leaving" or whatever he says, and then Moneypenny's like, "Leaving what?" "I'm leaving from On Her Majesty's Secret Service" or whatever. It like with a title like that, and with imagery like the title image of the three women kind of kneeling in front of the crown and in front of the British flag, you would think it would have something more to do with the Queen of England than anything else, instead of just a regular old Blofeld plot.
Yeah, I think the reason they went with it because it's the name of the book, so they wanted to stick with that as much as possible. But
right.
I think in hindsight, it was a bad choice. I would have changed the title. I mean, it does a movie's not made up in the title, but it was just kind of a nitpick that I think could have been adjusted a little bit and maybe made it easier to have an opening title sequence with a song that wasn't just an instrumental.
Yeah. I don't know. Let's okay, so ladies and gentlemen, just imagine there's a fence between Dan and I. I'm on one side and he's on the other. I have absolutely no highlights in this film. I wrote nothing down that I thought was good about this, and I have about 7 lowlights. So explain to me and the listeners that may think that this movie sucks why you think it's good.
Okay. First, I think you need to consider where movies are at this time. We're in 1969. We're about to hit the renaissance of the 1970s in film, where films are less about the studio, more about the directors. Movies like The Graduate and Easy Rider and Bonnie and Clyde have come out, and they changed the way films are done. We're seeing an influence of like the French New Wave and Akira Kurosawa, where there's more experimental measures being taken with movies. Directors are having a larger say in how their films are carried out, and studios are kind of taking a back seat. Movies in general kind of like have a more somber tone to them. The typical Hollywood ending is changing. It's no longer one of like gleefulness and happiness. It's more of regret and sorrow. And I think it took that and it tried to apply it to the Bond movie in a lot of ways. Like, personally, I think when you look at what directors have had the most impact on the movie, I think Peter Hunt has had the most on this. He tried to do something different, and it's completely different than everything that's come before, which I kind of understand why that leaves a sour taste in a lot of Bond fans' mouth, because it's not what they're used to. The editing is a lot different. He edited, most of the films before this, but this is the first time he's in the director's seat. So I think I just wanted to set the stage of that's kind of the reason why. One thing you need to consider when going into this movie. So the opening title sequence, for example, the pre-title sequence, that battle, that fight, I love it. I love how this movie is shot. It's well staged. I understand if there's it's very kinetic. It's almost like early onset shaky cam, and it's very similar to like movies like Casino Royale. I think that movie took a lot from this one, where the movie's never is always moving. It's always going with the action. And personally, I love that. I like seeing a director doing more with a movie, not just putting a camera down and letting things happen. He's adding a lot of quick cuts. He's ramping up the frame rate. He's adding slow motion. This was the first time ever a Bond movie had slow motion. Nothing we've seen before. What else? I also think he had a few like Hitchcockian moments where tension was built just using with no dialogue and no score. He just let things play out. There's two examples of this. There's the example when he's like in the office and he's trying to make a copy of all those secret documents. That scene is like 5 minutes or so, and there's no score to it. There's no dialogue. All it is done in editing. All that tension is built in editing. You see what's happening, and I like that. And there's also the sequence where Bond's trying to escape using the ski lift, where he's climbing on the rope trying to get out, and that to me was pretty brilliantly done. It was a combination of both using stunt doubles and using Lazenby, using on location scenes along with set scenes.
Right.
It's a really brief shot, but there's a one shot of what's Bond. He's on the rope and the snow's coming down. He's dangling on the wire. That was actually on location. That really happened. That wasn't just him on a stage. That was him on location, which I thought was a pretty.
Well, this was back in the time when films were actually, when they would do location filming, whether it be a stuntman or whether it be Lazenby or whomever, they actually did the stunts instead of, today, oh, hey, we can just CGI it.
Yeah, well, there was always a combination of both on location and set work. I mean, a lot of this movie was done in set work, but I think the sets were done really well, and it's almost a small thing. You may not even notice it. A lot of the sets have ceilings, and they use ceilings, and it kind of, that may not even catch your eye, but if you're considering their location, it makes it feel like it's all one place, and they're not jumping from an outside shot to an inside shot at some Hollywood studio. I think little pieces like that are helpful. But yeah, I think that's a big reason I enjoy this movie. I feel it really coincides with the movies of the time during this period that are, I guess, in a lack of a better word, are more adult. They're not as kitschy. They're not as genre. It's genre light, you would say. It's almost barely a Bond movie, and I think that kind of doesn't sit well with a lot of fans, which I understand. But I view this movie not as a Bond movie, but as a movie, and I think it succeeds as a movie. Some of the Bond elements aren't as strong, but I feel everything else, the kinetic action, I love the locales, the location of the Blofeld's base on top of that mountain is a real location that they just happened to find right before they started filming. It's just like rotating restaurant that was just finishing construction right before they started shooting, and they found it and they started to use it. And knowing that, actually going back and I rewatched it again, and having that knowledge that when they're on the top of that, like playing, what is that game called, where they're, I forget, they're playing like this.
It's not racquetball.
No, it's. Oh wow, it doesn't really matter. But it's on top of it. They're playing this game, and it's really on top of this location. And I hate heights. I'm not a fan of heights at all. So I'm just really nervous. I'm like, I hope no one falls, because that's a really fall drop. Because it's only one little bar. It's really icy. I'm like, I hope no one falls. That's really crazy. But that's probably my favorite part of this movie. Is I love Peter Hunt's direction. And that's one big reason why. I could also see why people would hate that, because a lot of people don't like a camera that's consistently moving or can't sit still, or an action that consistently cuts moment to moment and never has a frame longer than a few seconds. But I like that. I felt it was different than what came before. So.
Unlike you, I would have preferred if he stayed in the dark the entire time. Like when we open the opening sequence, it's him in the car and you don't know who it is. It's just some dude driving in a car smoking a cigarette. I think it's because they wanted to be able to hide the fact that even though back then people might have known that Connery wasn't coming back, but they wanted to hide the fact in the film of, hey, who's the new Bond? Let's have it be a surprise, etc., etc., etc. I honestly think that he should have just stayed in the dark the entire time.
I think the reason they shot it that way was kind of like a callback to Doctor No, when they kind of did the similar thing with Connery, where they showed just a little bit of him piece by piece until he finally said Bond, James Bond. And that's what they did here. I think that's the reason why they just show him lighting a cigarette. You don't really see his face until he says, the classic line.
Yeah. Speaking of lines, one damn line created the fan theory. One damn line. The other fella didn't have this much trouble, or whatever the line is.
Yeah. This didn't happen to the other guy.
Yeah. Whatever that line was. My next note after that was, Lazenby is no Bond. He's an Australian actor trying to hide his accent and sound American. James Bond should sound British or English. Even though Connery is a Scottish actor, at least he was believable as Bond.
Yeah. It was odd that he would direct the audience like that. It was him breaking that, that third wall or the fourth wall, which was strange. It felt odd and out of place. It was almost like, just addressing the audience like, yeah, okay, we get it. It's not Connery. Kind of just get over it. This is the new Bond, but it was strange. Yeah. But then they have that scene that goes against the fan theory where he's in his office going through all the knickknacks from the previous Bond films, from like Thunderball and Doctor No and stuff like that too. So it's like they're saying it isn't, but then they go back and say it is. So I think that was just one moment where they're just trying to address the audience.
I had such a problem watching the beginning fight scene. It was. I know you like it for the jump cuts, but the jump cuts to me made it so much worse. It was like you're on a roller coaster, but one of the wheels in the car fell off, or like someone shot out your tire on the highway, and your tire, you're down to the rim of the tire, and you're just driving like that. I could not stand the cut scenes in that fight scene. And you mean to tell me that anyone, not just Lazenby as an actor, not just James Bond, okay, James Bond, there are like maybe one or two people that in fictional history that you can say, oh, well, it's this person, so he can do whatever he wants to, which is James Bond and Batman. Okay, you mean to tell me that James Bond in a water scene can give a high kick at high tide with water crashing over him? I don't believe that at all. That whole scene just, oh.
Well, I guess maybe that's where a lot of people make up their mind about this movie, is that opening scene. If it doesn't work for you, this movie's not going to work for you. How did you feel? I know we talked about how Lazenby is not the greatest actor in the world. How do you feel he handled himself in the action sequences?
He himself, when it was him fighting, was fine. It was just shitty camera work, I think, is what it was.
Yeah,
I can't fault him for that. I fault the drunken asshole behind the camera, because like I said, there's a certain way to shoot fight scenes, and I am no filmmaker. But I've seen enough movies to where I can form an opinion on what I like to see in a fight scene. And what I mean by jump cuts, I don't mean like Lazenby punched and then a pow came on the screen and then you see a punch from the other guy. I'm talking about in that scene, it was the chick, it was Lazenby, and it was the two guys that were after the chick. Okay, so there's 4 people in that scene. You got Lazenby fighting the 2 guys and the chick running away, whatever the hell she's doing. Okay, you got Lazenby fighting one, knocks him down, turns around, but the camera jumps. It's not a smooth transition from him facing the one guy and then turn around to face the other guy. It jumps to a completely different angle. I almost said scene, but that's not proper. It jumps to a different angle, and I felt like I was on a roller coaster that was gonna fall off the track. Honestly, watching the fight scene, him fighting himself, him landing the punches and doing the kicks, outside of the one where they're in the water, I don't mind him as a fighter as Bond. That's fine. That's great. It's just really shitty camera work, I think.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think Lazenby is really great in the action moments. I think he realized he's not the greatest actor in the world, so he threw all of his effort into the action moments where he goes all out. I think he's better with much of the action, probably better than a lot of Bonds, much better than Moore, who we'll get in with. Probably, I don't think there's a Bond that can handle action as well as he does until probably Dalton. But I think he was really good in those moments. He was believable. He put his body into it. He had a physicality to him that we haven't seen before. And I think the reason why he uses that camera work, part of camera work, there's a few reasons. There's just to provide you a narrative, and there's other reasons to kind of, hit you in beyond a narrative and more get you in your senses to kind of give you off kilter. And I think I enjoy when a movie does that and uses multiple angles and doesn't keep the camera in one location. It can be overdone for sure, and this movie does overdo it at times. But anyway, I think we've kind of killed that.
But there's a way. There is a way in that opening scene. There is a way to do multiple angles without feeling like you're on the fucking tilt-a-whirl.
I guess I never got that. I don't know. Maybe.
The other big issue I have with it is Lazenby's acting, or quote unquote acting, in the mental hospital scene when he's explaining the genes and the genealogy, the speech that he's giving to the chicks. What he's saying, the words that are coming out of his mouth are not matching the lip syncing is so awful in this film. I honestly did not think. I thought that was, at one point watching that scene, I thought it was a completely different character because, again, he's trying to put on a slightly different accent than what he already used. And it just, I didn't realize until until someone said his name or whatever else it was. I didn't even realize that was supposed to be Bond. I don't know what the hell was wrong with me watching this movie, but I
could probably answer why that probably happened. And when he's undercover, when he's playing Sir Hilary Bray, that voice you're hearing, it isn't Lazenby. It's George Baker, who was in the movie earlier playing Bray.
Okay.
Lazenby couldn't get the accent down. He couldn't get it to work. So what they did is they went in and they did some ADR and they dubbed it with Baker. So that's probably why it didn't match up perfectly. But yeah, a lot of that didn't bother me that much, but it is noticeable in a few moments where you can tell it's dubbed. There's a lot of dubbing in the Bond franchise, and I didn't think it was any better or worse than what came before, like From Russia with Love or Dr. No with Honey Rider. I thought they were all on par with one another. It's a technique that is kind of gotten better through the years, but even at this time, I think it's rather noticeable. And like you even mentioned, like it took you out of the movie at that moment, and I think I could understand them doing that and not wanting Lazenby to give this horrible accent, but it's kind of like, it
ruins, for someone watching this, whether it's for the first time or whether it's for whatever, at least for me, it ruins the character of Bond when you're like, I could see if they and I know, well, you said this was 69, right?
Yes.
I know back then they did not have, Q Branch did not have vocal technology like what you would see in a Mission Impossible movie with a vocal strap or whatever else in your throat. But you would think they would find a way to work it into the story of why his voice is different, and you know what I mean? It's like,
at least
God,
call attention to it so it doesn't. It makes sense. It's like, okay, like he's using some recorder or something where it's not so blatant. It's tough. You either do that or you just hope no one notices. And I think they just went like, okay, let's hope no one notices. And unfortunately, it's pretty noticeable. So
it's pretty noticeable, yeah. Did you have any other bits that you didn't like about the film? I know you like a lot of the film, but is there any part that you didn't care for?
Yes, actually. What was strange was Bond's fashion in this movie was very weird and questionable at best. Listening to the commentary, Peter Hunt talked about how he wanted Bond to be very fashionable and of the time, and I think that was a horrible choice to make because some of his clothes in this are pretty hilarious in the wrong sense. He's wearing the ruffled tux. He's wearing a neckerchief at one point, and I think Bond should be a character of classic style. It shouldn't be in a certain time period. It should work in 1960 or 2012. So that was just a random choice, and I know Peter Hunt wanted Bond to dress like Peter Hunt did, and I think they should have said no in that case. But that was one odd choice. It'd be like Bond in the early 2000s or late 90s wearing hip huggers or Tommy Hilfiger. It's not something you want to see Bond doing. So just stick with the classic tux.
I think it honestly depends on the scene. Okay, sure, he's undercover in the mental hospital and whatever else. I believe he's wearing. Yeah, he was wearing a kilt because they made fun of him for it.
Yeah, that didn't bother me. It was just when he was being Bond and he's wearing a neckerchief and like,
right,
I'm like, why? He looks horrible.
When the character is being himself, he should either, depending on where he is, depending on the location, white tux, black bow tie, or reverse that, black tux, whatever, or just a regular business suit. If he's on the beach, maybe some sort of summer wear. Obviously, if he's in a winter scene, winter clothes. But don't try to follow fashion. Jesus Christ. Oh.
Yeah, that was really the only highlight I had, or low light I had that we didn't really talk about so far.
Yeah. I don't know. This is something I will never watch again. It's just...
There was just one other thing I thought I should mention. That's Diana Rigg as Tracy, the Bond girl in this. For my money, I think she's one of the best Bond girls ever. Starting with the fact that she can act. A lot of the Bond girls can't, and she has the ability to do that. Like we mentioned, I think it's because Lazenby isn't the greatest actor, so they got someone who can kind of carry him throughout. I like the fact that her character had depth and character development. And much of the story is hers, and I think when she's in it, it's a better movie, and when she's out of it, it's not. I'm not as interested. But I really loved her, and I loved the fact that there was a moment where her father is blackmailing Bond to try to get Bond to marry her, and she calls it out immediately. And that could have been like a She's All That moment where Bond's going out with her, and then she finds out Bond's only going out with her because of this information, and they have to fight and make up, and just one of those contrived plots that we see all the time. But she called it out immediately, which I appreciated, and avoided that She's All That moment. But yeah, I love Diana Rigg as Tracy. If we're to rank the Bond girls, she's one of my favorites.
Yeah, she was a great Bond girl. The other thing I want to talk about before we kind of wrap it up and go to a commercial break is, up to now, we know James Bond is a player. He is, the suave, we've never seen him say, hey, wait a second, I gotta cover up little Jimmy or anything like this. You know what I mean? It's like, it's one of those things where these films were made at the time that, safe sex wasn't that big of a deal, I don't think. And he is meant to be that type of ladies' man, playerish type. I don't know how I feel about him. Yes, I agree with you. Diana Rigg is great as Tracy, and Tracy is great as that character. I don't know how I feel about him being married. I just like that. That just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, it was an odd choice, one I didn't necessarily completely agree with, and it is kind of out of character for Bond. But I loved how they ended it, and I thought this could have, if Lazenby were to stay on, I think it led Bond down a completely different path, and I would have loved to see, Lazenby to come back for one more. Maybe he would be more comfortable and a better actor. But yeah, it does seem out of character, but how they ended it on a more somber note, kind of, with Lazenby kind of holding her, saying, "Oh, we have all the time in the world." I love that ending. It would have been better if Lazenby was a better actor because he doesn't really sell it very well. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That I just don't. And again, I think one of the reasons why I don't, follow the logic of, James Bond could be married. It actually happens when we get to a later film. When Tomorrow Never Lies was the original title of that one. But in that movie, Paris says, why did, you never came back, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's one of those things where James Bond, the character, has this enigma to himself that he doesn't let people in. That's part of who he is. He doesn't let people in because he doesn't want people to get hurt. Again, comparing James Bond to Batman, the same thing with Bruce Wayne and Batman is, he doesn't let people in because he doesn't want his enemies coming after those people, and that's exactly what, whether it be technical, that they weren't going after his wife in this, they were going after him, but they got her instead. It's one of those things where he just shouldn't. I don't think he should have been married. It just didn't sit too well with me either. So we are going to head to a quick commercial break, and then we're going to come back with some final thoughts and let you know what we're going to cover next week here on the Shaken Not Stirred Spotlight. We'll be back after this.
You can now hear the Geekcast Radio Network while on the go with Stitcher Smart Radio. Stitcher is a free-use and talk mobile app available for your smartphone. And when you download Stitcher to hear Geekcast Radio, you'll have a chance to win money. Downloading is quick and easy. Just find Stitcher in the App Store. During registration, hit the promo code box and enter Geekcast Radio, all one word, to get automatically entered to win $100. The latest episodes of the shows will be waiting for you in your favorites. You'll get access to lots of other amazing shows too. Always available to you on demand, no syncing. It's Stitcher Smart Radio. Don't forget to enter promo code Geekcast Radio when you register.
For you, the listeners of Movie Week in Review, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the option to check out their service. Use audibletrial.com/geekcastradio. All right, so really quickly, I thought of something off air that Dan had brought up, asked me if I had seen Diamonds Are Forever, and for those of you who have been listening to our Bond coverage here in Shaken Not Stirred, there are certain films that we are not covering because of time constraints and holidays, and it's amazing what Dan and I can be able to get done just before Thanksgiving and, just before, Christmas coming up and everything else. Diamonds Are Forever was one of those ones that did not make our choice list. I know it is the pre-title sequence of it is the revenge portion of Tracy getting killed on Her Majesty's Secret Service. Now, I had a thought. You had asked me if I had seen Diamonds Are Forever, and I said no. I said I should probably go back and watch that, and you said it's probably better if you don't. My thought was, what if they, because Diamonds was where Connery came back briefly, what if they did this? And obviously we can't go back and have them do this. What if they got Lazenby to come back for the pre-title? He ends up getting shot, and then after the title, Connery comes in. So it would, again, lend more to the fan theory of, hey, it's kind of like the whole Triple X thing of, there's a Triple X for each whatever, you know what I mean? Yeah. So what do you think of that? What do you think if they had done that?
I mean, that'd be one way to go with it, though I guess they would put themselves in a corner because they kind of hint in the Bond movie or in this film that they're the same person. But it's not. It wouldn't be the first continuity error with Bond. I mean, they have the issue where it's like the first time Blofeld and Bond meet, but they have met before in Bond history. So it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I think it would make a lot of Bond fans happy that see George Lazenby, get shot in the face or something. A lot of people would love that moment. But it would. I wouldn't be completely against it. It would make Diamonds Are Forever a better movie, which I'm completely for because that's one movie we're not covering, and honestly, I think it's the better choice because I really don't have many positive things to say about that film.
Yeah. All right. Final thoughts on this one, on Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Well, this is a very decisive film, as we kind of provided an example for in this retrospective. I would say if you've never watched it before, at least watch the opening pre-title sequence, and that will give you a good inclination if you're going to enjoy this movie or not. There are a lot of firsts for Bond. We see the first use of slow motion. It's the first time we get a ski sequence in Bond history, and that's kind of odd that we're this far into Bond, and this is the first time we get a ski sequence. And it's one of the better ones, but I personally am a big fan of this movie. A lot of Bond fans aren't. It's different. It's not like what came before. If you're a fan of things like Casino Royale, I think you'll probably enjoy this movie. if you don't like those, you prefer Pierce or you prefer Roger Moore, I don't think you're going to enjoy what Lazenby brings to the table. So it's very decisive, and I fall in the line of really loving it.
Yeah. Objectively, watching this film, I had so many issues with it. Stuff I didn't even write down or bring up. It was just, stuff that just made me want to hit my head against my desk. I cannot recommend this film at all to anyone. If you want to see it just to see it for the fact of no more Connery, cool. But other than that, I just don't care for On Her Majesty's Secret Service. We hope you enjoyed the Bond film review here in M-Wire Shaken Not Stirred series, and wish you'll join us next week when we'll return and talk about Live and Let Die. This is the first entry for Roger Moore, correct?
That's correct.
Yes. So much older than dirt. For now, I am TFG1Mike with
MovieRevolt Dan.
Thank you for listening. Until next time.
You've just listened to Movie Week in Review on GeekCastRadio.com. If you would like to leave feedback on the show, there are many ways to do so. First, you can visit the website, GeekCastRadio.com, where you can comment on the episode and all of our different podcasts. Be sure to rate our show on iTunes and leave us feedback. You can follow us on Twitter at GCRNMwire. Become a fan of us on Facebook by searching Geekcast Radio Network. You can email us at feedback@geekcastradio.com. Call the voicemail line 502-526-5821. Please remember to tell us the show you're leaving the message for and your name. So until next time, unleash the geek in you.
In a world, there, I said it, happy,